there. But regardless of that, I do want to kind of keep going somewhat. So last week, if I remember correct, we just kind of got we established, that Israel was ready to be delivered. They cried out to the Lord. He heard their cries. He had Moses in position, and he was sending him to be their deliverer, but we never got into him actually going to Pharaoh, and we really got into a long talk about Pharaoh's hardened heart, where that comes from. And we looked a little bit in the New Testament at that last week at Romans chapter 1. So that's what you missed if you missed last week. But I'm not going to go over all the plagues this year. We did that last year, or we might do that next year. But you guys, most of y'all in here, are probably familiar with the plagues. But the one plague that I will look at, and we'll look at for a couple minutes, and I don't want to stay on it forever, but I just love the Passover. It's just so significant, the Passover, and it's such a beautiful picture of what God's ultimate plan was for all of us. And so, if y'all turn to Exodus 12, and we'll look at that a little bit, and then we'll see how far we get tonight. But so, just in case nobody knows or hasn't studied the plagues, first of all, I would say do that. Read through the plagues. It's really interesting. I mean, it'll just make you think. I don't know, if nothing else, it'll make you think. Why in the world would anybody go through that? And not just submit to God. It's just amazing, that people, what hard hearts people can have, and what strong wills people can have against God doing, mighty things,
We're still doing it today?
Still doing it today. You're right about that, But just you would think, my goodness. Just turning the water into blood would have been enough for me, I feel like. Okay, that's it. I'm done. But anyway, we're at the last one. Every time it looks like Pharaoh's going to soften up, maybe let him go, he hardens his heart again, and then God sends another plague. Well, they finally get to the last one. And that particular plague is described in chapter 11. It's at the beginning of chapter 11. But getting into verse 12 is where I kind of want to start reading. But basically what God said was that he was going to send a death angel over Egypt. And he was going to kill the firstborn of every Egyptian. And he was, even the cattle and the beasts of the fields too. He was going to kill all their firstborn. But he was going to kill all the firstborn that did not do as he directed. So even Israel was going to have to make a decision. So let's read in chapter 12. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. And this was in the spring of the year, but they had, God said, this is going to be the beginning of the year for you. He was starting something new for them, and he was making them different. As Brother Mike said this morning, that we've been called to be set apart, holy, peculiar people for the Lord. That's what he did here with Israel. He was making them holy, separate. And so he says in this first month, from here forward, speaking of the congregation in verse 3 of Israel, saying, the 10th day of this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. So, if a lamb's too much for a house, you can get with another house, and work that out. And he says, but your lamb, in verse 5, shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats. And you shall keep it unto the 14th day of the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. I think that I like that, kill it in the evening. It's because this was, it was something they were all doing, but it was individual. Each one shall kill their lamb, their personal lamb. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper door post of the house, wherein they shall eat it. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, unleavened bread, in other words, bread that doesn't rise. And with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden it all with water or boiled, but roast it with fire, head and legs, and with the purtenance or the innards thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning you shall burn with fire. I mean, this lamb was to be totally consumed. The blood of the perfect spotless lamb was to be applied to your doorpost at the top and on the sides, but then the lamb itself was to be roasted with fire and eaten, and then what you didn't eat was then to be thrown on the fire and be totally consumed. And so it says in verse 11, thus shall you eat it with your loins girded, in other words, with your moving clothes on, shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. This is not dragging around. This ain't Super Bowl party. This is not, hanging out tailgating deal here. This is the Lord's Passover, and it's going to have a result, and you're going to need to move. And he says, for I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood, I love this verse, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the households where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. Does that sound familiar at all? We've seen that, don't we? When I see the blood, I will pass over you. And so, anybody getting a picture yet? All right, so it says, and this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. Does anybody know what meal Jesus was eating in the upper room with his disciples? The Passover. That's right. He was eating this meal that they were to keep annually. This is what they were eating. They were eating their Passover meal. And it says, you should keep it as a feast. And in 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day to the seventh day, that show shall be cut off from Israel. And in the first day there shall be a holy convocation. And the seventh day there shall be a holy convocation to you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat, that only may be done to you. And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For in this selfsame day have I brought you your armies out of this land of Egypt. Therefore shall you observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. So he goes on now to tell them, the instructions. And he tells them down here in verse 22, and you shall take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that's in the basin, the bowl at the bottom of the door. And he says, and strike the lintel and two side posts with blood that is in the basin, and none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians. And when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the two side posts, the Lord will pass over the door, and will not suffer the destroyer to come in under your house to smite you. And you shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever. And it shall come to pass when you come to the land which the Lord will give you, according as he's promised, that you shall keep this service. And it shall come to pass when your children say unto you, what mean ye by this service? Then you shall say, it is a sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses. And the people bowed their head and worshipped. And the children of Israel went away and did as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And I marked that verse right there too. That's a key verse right there too. We can get all the instruction we want, but if we don't do it, it ain't doing us a lot of good, is it? But when we get instruction and then we do it, that shows a real faith, right? And so they exercised their faith. In other words, they believed God. Now, in this case, you say, well, who wouldn't believe him? I don't know. I met some pretty doubtful folks in my life. You give them some real deep instructions, and you tell them, this will work, and they're like, I don't know about that. But Israel, in this case, of course, they had just seen God do what? Bring 9 plagues on Israel, and it was, he had just done mighty works. And even the things that in the beginning Pharaoh's wise men could do, God's, God was able to destroy that, like whenever, I love when you go back and read when he throws down his rod and it turns into a snake, and then Pharaoh's wise men or magicians come in and throw down theirs and they turn into snakes, and he's like, oh wow, they can do it too. Do you remember what happened to them?
The snake ate their snake.
That's right. Yeah, the snake that Moses and Aaron threw down consumed their snakes. So everything they did just made it worse until they couldn't, duplicate it anymore anyway. But anyway, they showed their faith right here and did as the Lord told them to do. And so it came to pass. And by the way, this is another small lesson to learn. Every time God says he's going to do something, it will come to pass. This happened quick, but some things don't. But they will all come to pass. He says he's coming back, right? Mm-hmm. And everything else he says. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne, unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. Can you imagine that? What a mess. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, rise up and get ye forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord as ye have said. He didn't send them this time to Pharaoh and ask permission, did he? Mm-hmm. They had on there, they'd been girded their loins, they were ready to travel. They had observed God's Passover, they did what they were told, and now God says, go. And so they go, and they take, and it says also, he says, take your flocks, your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we be all dead men. And the Egyptians actually agreed with them. That's what basically it says right there. They were like, yeah, y'all get out of here. This is, we've had enough. That's not going to last, by the way. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses. And they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and gold and raiment. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such as they required. And they spoiled the Egyptians. They took whatever they wanted. They took whatever they needed. Isn't it amazing how the Lord will just fight a battle for you and just give you everything you need? I mean, they didn't have anything to take on this journey. And the Egyptians just gave them everything they had, basically. They just said, here, take it, go, get out of here.
When you look at what God tells them to use for the tabernacle, they wouldn't have had any of that stuff if the Egyptians hadn't given it to them.
That's right. And the Egyptians were a wealthy nation too. They had an abundance to give. And so it was very important for God, to start them off with this footing. And so, and the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and they spoiled them. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men, besides, women and children. And a mixed multitude went up also with them, in flocks and herds, even very much cattle. So, stopping right there for a minute before we move on. Does anybody, and I know you guys know what I'm talking about, but did you get it, what he's doing right here? Now, he literally does a Passover that strikes the firstborn of all the Egyptians, not only their household, but their cattle and their beasts dead. There's no house where there's not somebody dead. He literally sent the death angel over. But do we not see a type or a picture here of something greater? So when our time comes, then the Lord's, going to judge us. He's going to look at us, and the blood applied to our life is going to be whether or not we make it.
Jesus is our Passover. From
death to life. That's right. Jesus is our Passover, which I think it's in 1 Corinthians 5. Yeah, let's look at that just real quick. 1 Corinthians 5. So he says, in verse 6, your glorying is not good. Know ye not that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump? Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. He's telling us right there that the ultimate Passover, the ultimate perfect lamb, and the blood that has to be applied, not just to get us out of one bad night, but to get us out of eternal death, is Jesus Christ. And so when the Lord passes over, he sees the blood of Christ. And we're all equal in God's eyes when he sees the blood of Christ. So I think that's neat. And they were also to memorialize this, and he told them why. Remember why he told them to memorialize it? So that they could tell when they were asked what God had done for them, and what are we supposed to do? What's basically our one commandment? Is to go and tell. That's right. We're supposed to love one another, but he says, go and make disciples and share the gospel, the good news. So this was a great night, a great event. They still observe it in Israel to this very day. They still eat the Passover. But it was a picture of a greater Passover. And it was a great, and remember this too. What did John the Baptist say when Jesus showed up on the scene when he was baptizing? You remember what he said?
Behold the Lamb who takes away the sins.
Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Jesus is the King, but he first came as the Lamb. The Lamb, the perfect, spotless Lamb that was to shed his blood for mankind. So anyway, you just can't skip over Exodus without looking at that and how wonderful it is and how God had that plan in mind all the time, right? And so now, let's skip ahead just a little bit. Flip over into chapter 14, and let's look at back in 13, about verse 17. So they're now on their journey leaving, okay? And it says, and it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt. So he kept them away from, a possible conflict because, there was a good chance they'd just say, let's go back. So he says, he didn't take them that way, but it says God led the people about through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. And the children of Israel went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt. And when Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had straightly sworn the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and he shall carry up my bones. That's Joseph, who he's saying. Joseph said, this is going to happen, and you shall carry my bones with you when you go. So they're fulfilling prophecy right there, and they're doing what Joseph said. And they took their journey from Succoth and encamped in Etham in the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go day and night. And he took away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire. He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
He didn't just have all the plagues and bring them out. He's right. They can see it every day and every night. And then when they get out there, they still want to go back.
Yeah.
It's on the star right here.
It's right. It's amazing. And it's amazing how God showed his power to these people over and over again. And they were stiff-necked people,
Yeah.
And it's not like they only had faith to go on. They had seen all of these things.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
They've never been too right bunch, have they?
Yeah, I tell you, man, people are just, we just have a sin nature, don't we? And we have a tendency to doubt and serve ourselves. But it says in verse 14 now, so we know the journey they went on. We know God's going with them in a mighty way. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel that they turn and encamp before, this one's a tough one, Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, over against Baal-zephon, before it shall ye encamp by the sea. Just a little studying of that. God put them between a rock and a hard place. They didn't have anywhere to go, basically, but back, without crossing a mountain, a very difficult mountainous area, or a sea. So, he took them to a place he could only get them through. And that's what we're fixing to see. Because they could have went by land through Philistia, but he says he didn't want to take them that way because they would meet the resistance and then turn back. But let's see what happens here in a minute. They're going to do that kind of anyway. It says, for Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in. So he's doing this on purpose to draw Pharaoh in. Because he knows Pharaoh's going to say, oh man, those boneheads, they went the wrong way. We got them. They can't cross the sea. They can't go across that mountain. They're going to have to come back. It's all they can do is hold their ground. We got them. We got them right where we want them. We'll go get them. So he says, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he shall follow after them. If You don't understand Pharaoh's hard heart. Watch Kaylee's video from last week because we went over that and discussed it a whole bunch. And I can talk to you about it later. But anyway, he says he will harden Pharaoh's heart that he shall follow after them. And I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all his hosts, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. And it was told the king of Egypt that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was turned against the people. So they've gotten over this whole deal where they kicked them out of town real fast. And now they're mad and they want to get them. And it says, why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? And he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots and all the chariots of Egypt and captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued after the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with a high hand. But the Egyptians pursued after them, and all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea in the locations we just mentioned. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes. Listen to him right here. And behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. And they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? I mean, they're getting smart with him now, aren't they? I mean, since there's no graves, did you take us out here to die? He says, they said, wherefore hast thou dealt with us this way to carry us forth out of Egypt? What have you done? You just brought us out here to kill us, Moses. They say, is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. I mean, boy, they turned on it, haven't they? Quick. You know, I didn't hear any of them complaining when the Passover happened and the Lord, you know, let them out with a spoil of the Egyptians. But now that it looks like they're going to die, they're in a pickle. They're turning on Moses in a hurry, and they're just basically saying, what have you done here? You brought us out here to get us killed. But I love this verse right here.
Yes.
These two verses are two of those marker verses. And it took me a little while to start grasping this verse too. But Moses, imagine being in his position now, being in his shoes. Moses is leading these people out, and he don't know what God's going to do either. And here they are in a trap, as so it seems. And they ain't got no boat. And you're going to take this many people.
Some road well over 1 million people.
Yeah.
Across
You're going to take well many people, a raft at a time. or across a great mountainous terrain. But it says, and Moses said unto the people, and this shows Moses' faith. He might not have been perfect. He might have had temper, but he had a lot of faith in God. And Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever.
Hallelujah. And
then verse 14, the Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace.
They don't sell no more because they're going to be dead.
That's right. They're fixing to be consumed.
That's right.
And you know what, though? Man, I struggle with standing still. I don't know about y'all, but I struggle. I even struggle when I was reading, when I first started studying the Bible. What does it mean to stand still? You know what it means? Stand still. It means exactly what it says. It means quit trying to fight the battle on your own. And that's where I struggle. I don't know about y'all, but I got to fix it. I don't want to wait. You know, I got to go ahead of the Lord. I got to fix this battle. I mean, I'd have probably been trying to swim somebody over on a dead driftwood or something by this point. But he says, you stand still and the Lord will fight for you. And that's powerful and it's great faith. And the Lord says unto Moses, wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they go forward. What? But lift up thy rod and stretch out thy hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them, and I will get me honor upon Pharaoh and upon all his host, upon his chariots and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots and upon his horsemen. Remember, the Egyptians thought Pharaoh was a god. So the nation itself, they think Pharaoh's their god. He told them that he was. And he, treated them in such a way too. But now they're going to know who the Lord is. and they should have already. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. And it became between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that one came not near the other all the night. Wow, what the Lord does right there. He just builds a wall right between them. You know, he put one in.
Shining forward for the.
Yeah, it's like one of those windows, you know, that you see that you can't see through on one side, but you can on the other. You know, but it was the Lord's cloud that done it. You know, just amazing. You know how the Lord will fight for us if we let Him. And it says, and Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. You know, it's just amazing to me too that not just that He divided the water, but that He dried the ground too. I mean, they not just passed over. You know, if He'd have just divided the water, it might have been hard walking through there.
Well, not just that, but you know they had carts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't roll through.
That's right. They had all kinds of stuff they were dragging through and carrying through, and beasts probably. So it says, and the children of Israel went in the midst of the sea upon the dry ground. The waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left. And remember that. They were a wall to their right and to their left. Because I've heard all the doubters, History Channel crap and everything else about, well, you know, that time of year, the Red Sea would have been shallow. And
I've read that it said that it was a mistranslation. It was the Reed Sea, which was only like 18 inches deep, and so they walked across like that.
I've heard that myth too.
It's just as miraculous that He can drown 600 or everything in 18 inches of water.
Yeah, I'd like to see somebody take a bathtub and split water. And I want to see the part where you split dry too, by the way. I don't even see how big the water in there. But yeah, that's right. It's amazing even if it's just 18 inches. But it says right here that there's a wall on either side. So this was deep water. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea. Even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. So, man, they're chasing us right in here. What's going to happen? And took off their chariot wheels. Wait a minute, I missed that. Verse 24. And it came to pass that in the morning, watch, the Lord looked up under the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily. So that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it. And the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw the great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. And that's the end of that. And his servant Moses. And then they go on to worship the Lord, as we should always do when God gives us a great victory in chapter 15. So we're already running close to out of time today. But I just love that story too. I love the Passover, and I love the way God delivered them in this battle where they really honestly couldn't win without him. You know what I mean? I mean, he took them to a place where he could only deliver. It had to be his hand, because they weren't getting across that sea, and they weren't going to defeat Pharaoh's army either. They had chariots and horsemen. You know, they had them big time whooped. In the next 5 minutes, I'll just recap some of the important stuff here, so that we can kind of start transitioning to our next step. A couple of key things that happened from this point forward, and you guys can read through this if you want. In Exodus 20, you can read the 10 Commandments. He goes up and receives the initial 10 Commandments, but probably a common misperception is that that's just the beginning of the law, but there was much more law to be given. So if you go to Exodus 21 through 24, it gives him the rest of the law. And you can study the law if you ever want to in Leviticus. Leviticus has a good breakdown of all. It's not easy reading necessarily, and I'm gonna say get you an easier reading version of the Bible, maybe just to kind of read through that the first time. Not a bad idea, but it's very interesting though. Remember the point of it all. He was setting this nation aside to be a holy nation, different than any other nation. He was coming to earth through this nation to save the world, not just save through one circumstance, but to save our souls. And so they were going to be peculiar, holy, and different for the Lord. And so, so you can read that in 21 through 24. Then they begin the preparations for the first tabernacle. So there, previously to this, was not a place of worship, a place of sacrifice. And he gives them the instructions. As Dwayne said, they wouldn't have had any jewels or silver or gold or anything if they hadn't taken it to Egypt. But it was important that they took it because God's going to give them direction on the tabernacle, and it's very specific. I mean, very specific. And the priests and the stuff that they wear and the robes and all that stuff.
When I look at that, one thing I see first off is God is such a God of order. Mm-hmm. He's not a God of confusion. He's a God of order.
He is absolutely a God of order.
He lays it all out.
You can't deny that when you read this because it's very meticulous. It's very detailed.
Well, even when he was giving them the instructions for the Passover, sometimes we miss some of those little things like unleavened bread. They didn't have to wait for the bread to rise, and he told them to put their clothes on and their shoes on. There's a time like coming later we find out Moses is supposed to take his shoes off.
That's right.
But it's basically like you said, getting your traveling clothes on. So he was preparing them, even in the little things you see how he prepared them. And then I think too, Jeff, I just want to say this. I know I am this way. Sometimes you look at these things and it moves you to no end to think that God did that, but don't we limit him when it comes to our own lives? I mean, we're just as guilty as these people were. We stand at that riverbank, proverbial riverbank, doubting what God can do when we know he's already done it.
That's right. He's ready to fight the battle for us too.
Yes, amen.
And so the tabernacle happens. And two real quick things because it's time to go, but they're important so that we know they happen. If you flip real quick to Numbers 13, this is a significant thing, real quick. And I won't be able to read all of it because it's time to go. But at the end of Numbers 13, he sends out a group to spy on they're getting ready to go to the promised land, okay? They're finally, going to go and take this land flowing with milk and honey, the land of Canaan. But they send out some spies ahead. And so they send the spies out ahead in verse 25. And when they returned from searching the land after 40 days, they went and came to Moses and to Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel. And they showed them some fruit from the land. I'm skipping a little bit. And they told them, we came unto the land where you sent us, and surely it does flow with milk and honey, and here's the fruit. But nevertheless, in verse 28, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there, and the Amalekites dwell in the land in the south, and there's the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites in the mountains, and the Canaanites in the sea, and by the coast of Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go at once and possess it. Well, this one guy, Caleb, he was ready to go. He knew the Lord was fighting for him. And he said, let's go, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, we be not able to go against the people, for they are stronger than we. So, God just delivered them across the sea, and now they're scared of some men. And he says, and they brought up an evil report of the land which they searched on the children of Israel. And they said, the land through which we have gone to search it, it's a land that's eaten up with inhabitants, and the people that we saw in it are great stature. And there we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come of the giants, and were in our own sight as grasshoppers. And notice they were everywhere. They were giants and they were everywhere, And so we were in their sight. And so, they were giants and we were grasshoppers, in other words. But the people come back and they don't believe. They doubt. And so we're out of time, but basically what happens here is the Lord tells them that you're going to have to stay an extra year for every day that you doubted. And all of you, except Caleb and Joshua, which Joshua we're going to hear about later, all of you but Caleb and Joshua are going to die before you ever get to go over into the land. So they rebel against the Lord, they doubt the Lord, and they end up having to wander in the wilderness for 40 years before they can go in, and only 2 of them that were there get to go in. And so that's a significant thing. You know, they could have took the promised land right here, and they didn't get to. And then there's one other thing, it's over in Numbers 20, and we'll look at it next week as we transition to the next step. But also, Moses ends up making a mistake that keeps him from being able to go to the promised land. He gets a little temper tantrum, which I don't blame him really when you read it, but nevertheless, it cost him, and he doesn't get to go into the promised land either. And so that plays into our next step, which, you know, is the promised land step. So anyway, we'll transition from the Exodus to the promised land starting next week. So y'all got anything to add before we go? All right. Scott, you close us out.
Lord, once again, we thank you for the opportunity to come into your house, Father, the tabernacle here at New Salem, God, and just the opportunity to study your word and to witness and to bear fruit from the things you've done in the past, God, and how we can apply it to our lives, Father, that we may not go through some of the same struggles, Father, but you saw the Israelites through many times over, Father, and you're still seeing them through, God, and the same God that you are for them, Father, you're the same God for us, and we should just tap into the power and the resource that you are to its fullest extent, Father, and not put limits on you, and be ye of little faith, God. We love you tonight, Father. We thank you for each member that's gathered here, Father. May you bless families. May you continue to bless Jeff in his studies and his preparation for this class, God. And just go us in this upcoming hour, Father, and may you be glorified and lifted up. And we ask all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Scott, you weren't here last week. You were messing.